Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shadowed halls of Mount Olympus, where love doesn't arrive with gentle whispers and warm embraces. It crashes through lives like lightning, leaving scorch marks on mortal hearts and divine pride alike. You're walking barefoot across cool marble floors in a realm where gods play with human emotions the way children play with toys. Carelessly and without thought for the breaking. The air smells of ambrosia and regret, and if you listen closely, you can hear the echo of lovers calling names that will never be answered again. Tonight, you'll witness 4 tales of cursed love that haunt the ancient world, stories where passion becomes punishment and devotion transforms into disaster. These aren't the triumphant myths of heroes slaying monsters, these are the quieter tragedies. The ones the Greeks whispered about when the wine ran low and the fire burned down to embers. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why we wear laurel crowns for victory or why spring flowers seem tinged with sadness. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below. But make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're listening from tonight, whether you're tucked under blankets in Toronto or watching stars fade in Sydney. Maybe share which Greek myth first captured your imagination when you were young. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible, turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the edge of a story that begins with beauty so dangerous it angers a goddess. Psyche, her name means soul in ancient Greek. And yes, that's where we get the word psychology, is a mortal princess whose loveliness has become a problem. People stop worshipping at Aphrodite's temples because they're too busy staring at Psyche instead. They bring flowers to the girl's doorstep, compose songs about her graceful walk, her luminous eyes, her laugh that sounds like wind chimes in a summer breeze. Aphrodite notices. Gods always notice when mortals forget their place. The goddess of love summons her son Eros, you might know him as Cupid in his Roman form, and commands him to make Psyche fall in love with the most hideous creature on earth. It's the kind of petty divine revenge the Greek pantheon specialised in. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite's jealousy represents ancient anxieties about feminine beauty as social currency, or if it's simply a narrative device to set tragedy in motion. Either way, Eros descends on silent wings to complete his mother's vindictive errand. But here's where fate takes its first unexpected turn. Eros pricks himself with his own arrow while gazing at sleeping Psyche. Love hits him like a thunderbolt, immediate and absolute. The god who's made countless beings fall helplessly for unsuitable matches now finds himself caught in his own trap. It's rather like a locksmith locking himself out of his own house, embarrassing and entirely his own fault. Psyche's parents grow worried. Their daughter's beauty has become a curse of a different sort. No mortal man dares court her, fearing comparison to a goddess. They consult the oracle at Delphi, that mysterious prophetess whose pronouncements shaped Greek decision-making for over 1,000 years. The oracle's words chill them. Psyche must be abandoned on a mountain peak dressed in funeral garments, to await a husband who is not mortal, a creature even the gods fear. You watch Psyche's father weep as he leads a procession up the rocky mountainside. The girl wears black, and mourners wail as though she's already dead. This is a wedding and a funeral combined, and the Mediterranean sun beats down on the tragic parade with indifferent warmth. When they leave her alone on that desolate peak, Psyche doesn't cry. She's moved beyond tears into a numb acceptance of fate. Then the west wind, Zephyrus, arrives like a gentle exhale from the world itself. He lifts Psyche with invisible hands, cradling her as carefully as you'd carry a butterfly, and transports her down into a hidden valley where a palace waits. This isn't just any palace. It's a structure that seems to exist slightly out of phase with reality. its walls gleaming with gems that haven't been named yet, its gardens growing flowers that bloom in colours the human eye shouldn't be able to perceive. Invisible servants attend to Psyche's every need. They draw baths that smell of rose and honey, lay out garments softer than thought itself, serve meals that taste like childhood memories of comfort. Voices without bodies speak kindly to her, and slowly, her fear begins to dissolve into wonder. She is alone but not lonely, attended but not watched. When darkness falls, truly falls, like a velvet curtain dropping over the world, her mysterious husband finally comes to her. You can hear his footsteps, feel the displacement of air as he moves, smell the divine scent that clings to his skin like starlight and wild honey. But you cannot see him. This is his single, absolute rule. Psyche must never look upon his face. She must love him in complete darkness, trust him without the evidence of her eyes. And she agrees. What choice does she have? Really? But more than that, she finds herself genuinely falling for this invisible presence. He speaks to her with such tenderness, such understanding. His touch is gentle, reverent even, in the absolute darkness of their bedchamber. Psyche discovers that love doesn't need eyes. It exists in the space between heartbeats, in the warmth of breath against skin, in words that land soft as snow. Scholars have long debated what this arrangement represents. Some see it as a metaphor for faith, for loving the divine without proof. Others interpret it as commentary on the nature of trust in marriage, particularly in ancient Greece where many couples barely knew each other before their wedding night. A few fringe theorists even suggest the tale preserves memories of mystery cult initiations, where devotees experience the sacred in total darkness. Days melt into weeks, weeks into months. Psyche lives in luxury, loved nightly by an unseen husband who departs before dawn's first light can betray his appearance. She should be happy. She is happy, mostly. But a small seed of doubt has been planted, and it grows in the darkness just as surely as her love does. Her invisible husband warns her. Her sisters are coming, worried about her fate, climbing the mountain to mourn at the spot where she was abandoned. He begs her not to see them, not to let them into this perfect hidden world. They will bring ruin, he whispers against her hair, and you can hear the prophecy in his voice, the inevitable tragedy already unfolding in the space between his words. But Psyche misses her family. She misses women's laughter and familiar voices. She promises she'll be careful. She won't reveal too much. She just needs to see them, to let them know she's alive and well. Her husband relents, though you can feel his reluctance like a weight in the air, heavy with foreknowledge. Zephyrus brings the sisters down to the valley, and their jaws drop at the sight of the palace. These are women who married well by mortal standards, one to a king, another to a wealthy merchant, but their homes are hovels compared to this impossible architecture. You watch jealousy blossom in their eyes like poisonous flowers, quick and vivid, over wine and honeyed figs. Psyche makes her first mistake. She describes her husband inconsistently. Nervous lies tangling on her tongue. First he's a young hunter, then a middle-aged merchant, then, catching herself, a handsome young man again. Her sisters exchange glances sharp as knives. Sister, they say, dripping false concern. The oracle said your husband would be a monster. What if he's hiding some terrible form? What if he plans to devour you once you're with child? They plant the seed of suspicion with expert precision, water it with fears, and watch it sprout. That night you feel Psyche's heart hammering as she lies beside her invisible husband, listening to his peaceful breathing. Her sister's words coil through her mind like serpents, squeezing trust until it gasps for air. She's hidden an oil lamp and a sharp knife beneath the bed, just to look, she tells herself. just to prove them wrong. The weight of the blade feels heavy with betrayal already, though she hasn't yet committed the sin that will shatter everything. When his breathing deepens into the rhythm of sleep, Psyche's trembling hand reaches for the lamp. The moment stretches impossibly long, and you want to call out, to warn her. But myths don't work that way. They unfold with a terrible inevitability of dominoes falling, each piece tipping the next toward disaster. She strikes the flint, light flares, and there, sleeping beside her, is the most beautiful being she's ever seen. Eros lies sprawled in divine perfection, golden curls tumbling across the pillow, skin that seems to glow from within, wings folded against his back like a swan's, each feather gleaming white as fresh snow. His bow and arrows rest nearby, the instruments of love itself, capable of making anyone fall for anyone. He's breathtaking. He's terrible. He's hers, and she's just destroyed everything. Her hand shakes. A drop of hot oil spills from the lamp and lands on his bare shoulder. Eros wakes with a gasp of pain and betrayal. His eyes meet hers, divine gold meet in mortal brown, and in that gaze you see love and hurt and disappointment swirling together. Love cannot live without trust, he says, his voice breaking on the words. Then his wings snap open, filling the room with displaced air, and he's gone through the window, rising into the night sky like a comet in reverse. The palace vanishes the moment he leaves. One heartbeat is there, all marble and magic, and the next Psyche is kneeling on bare mountainside. Her fine clothes turn to rags, the taste of loss bitter as wormwood on her tongue. She's lost paradise through curiosity, and the parallel to other stories, Eve and the apple, Pandora and her jar, isn't accidental. The ancient Greeks understood that knowledge often comes at the price of innocence. Psyche doesn't accept this ending. She refuses to let her story conclude with loneliness and regret. She walks down the mountain on bleeding feet, determined to find Eros, to win him back, to prove that love can survive even catastrophic mistakes. It's admirable, really, this mortal stubbornness in the face of divine rejection. But first, she needs information. She visits temples of Demeter and Hera, begging the goddesses for help. They turn her away. No one wants to anger Aphrodite, whose rage at this point has reached thermonuclear levels. The goddess of love has discovered that her son not only disobeyed her, but fell for the very girl he was supposed to curse. Aphrodite's pride is wounded, and wounded pride in a goddess is more dangerous than any monster. Finally, with nowhere else to turn, Psyche does the unthinkable. She walks directly into Aphrodite's temple and offers herself as a servant. It's like a mouse volunteering to be a cat's plaything. But Psyche's desperation has evolved into a strange kind of courage. Aphrodite's laugh could cut glass. You think you can win back my son through servitude? Very well. Let's see if you're worthy of divine love. The goddess clicks her fingers, and suddenly a massive pile of mixed seeds appears. Wheat, barley, millet, poppy seeds, lentils, and beans, all jumbled together in a mountain that reaches your waist. Sort these by type before sunset, Aphrodite commands, or face my full wrath. You kneel beside Psyche in the temple courtyard, staring at this impossible task. There must be millions of individual seeds, each tiny and similar to its neighbours. The sun is already past its zenith, beginning its slow arc toward evening. Your fingers hover over the pile, and the futility crashes over you like a wave. This isn't a task. It's a punishment disguised as one, designed to break the spirit before the body. Psyche begins anyway, picking up seeds one by one, trying to create separate piles. Her fingers move frantically, but for every dozen seeds she sorts, 1,000,000 remain. Tears blur her vision, falling onto the pile and making the seeds stick together. Then you notice movement at the edges of the courtyard. A single ant appears, then another, then dozens, then thousands. They pour from cracks in the stone like a living stream of organisation, and they begin to sort. Archaeological evidence from ancient Greek temples actually shows grain storage areas where ants were deliberately tolerated because they helped keep stores organised and free of spoiling. The myth preserves a kernel of agricultural wisdom wrapped in magic. The ants work with impossible efficiency, each one carrying seeds to the appropriate pile with no confusion, no hesitation. They move like a single organism with thousands of tiny bodies. And you realise that nature itself is helping Psyche, perhaps because her love is genuine, or perhaps because even insects understand the cruelty of Aphrodite's test. By sunset, the task is complete. 7 neat piles stand where chaos reigned, and the ants have vanished back into their hidden kingdom beneath the stones. Aphrodite returns, and her face darkens when she sees the sorted seeds. She knows Psyche didn't accomplish this alone, but the task was completed, and even goddesses must honour the letter of their own challenges. "Beginner's luck," she hisses. "Tomorrow will be harder." The next morning, Aphrodite sends Psyche to gather golden fleece from the sun sheep that graze by a river. These aren't ordinary sheep. They're creatures of Helios, the sun god himself, and their wool gleams like captured daylight. But they're also violently aggressive during the day, their hooves sharp enough to split skulls, their horns capable of goring anyone who approaches. Historians still argue whether these sheep represent some now extinct breed known for aggression, or whether they're purely metaphorical, representing challenges that seem valuable but deadly. Psyche stands by the riverbank, watching the sheep graze on the opposite shore. They shimmer in the morning heat, beautiful and terrible, and you can feel the warmth radiating from their wool even at this distance. She takes a step toward the water, ready to wade across and try her luck. A voice stops her. It's the river itself speaking, or perhaps the reeds that grow along its banks, whispering with the wisdom of things that have watched and waited for centuries. "Don't cross now," the reeds murmur, their rustling voice barely audible over the water's flow. "Wait until afternoon when the sheep rest in shade, then gather fleece from the brambles where they've brushed past. You need not face them directly to claim what you seek." It's such practical advice that it almost seems like cheating, but wisdom often looks like shortcuts to those who prefer brute force. Psyche waits, and the morning stretches long and hot. The sun climbs, beats down, and finally begins to descend. The sheep retire to the shade of riverside trees, their energy dimmed by heat and full bellies. Psyche crosses then, moving quietly through the shallows. The bramble bushes along the sheep's path are studded with golden wool, caught on thorns as the creatures passed. She gathers it carefully, filling her arms with fleece that's warm as a living thing, soft as cloud and bright as hope. Some pieces are substantial tufts, others just a few strands, but together they accumulate into a shimmering bundle. When she returns to Aphrodite, the goddess's jaw clenches. 2 tasks completed, 2 impossible things achieved. But Aphrodite isn't done, she's just getting started. And her next challenge will be the deadliest yet. "There's a stream," Aphrodite says, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, "that feeds the rivers Styx and Cocytus. It flows from a high mountain cliff, guarded by dragons and surrounded by slippery rocks. Bring me a crystal jar filled with its water." This task is particularly nasty because those 2 rivers, the Styx and Cocytus, flow through the underworld itself. The Styx is the river of hatred that the gods swear their unbreakable oaths upon. Cocytus is the river of lamentation, where the screams of the damned echo for eternity. Water that feeds both would be toxic to mortals, metaphysically if not literally. Ancient Greek geographers actually tried to locate the real Styx, with some claiming it was a waterfall in Arcadia, whose water was so cold and mineral heavy it could dissolve metal. The myth and reality intertwine like the rivers themselves. You climb beside Psyche up the treacherous mountain path, feeling the air grow thin and cold. The stream Aphrodite described isn't just dangerous. It exists in a liminal space between the world of the living and the realm of death. The rocks glisten with perpetual moisture, slick as ice, and the cliff face rises sheer and unforgiving. Below, you can glimpse valleys shrouded in mist that seems to move with intention, reaching up like ghostly fingers. The stream itself pours from a crack in the rock face, its water so black it looks like liquid night. Dragons coil around the source, not the fire-breathing movie monsters you might imagine, but serpentine creatures with scales that shift through colours that hurt to look at, iridescent and wrong. Their eyes are fixed on the water, unblinking, and their hissing fills the air with a sound like wind through dead trees. This is a place where mortals aren't meant to tread, where the boundary between life and death grows gossamer thin. Psyche edges forward, the crystal jar clutched in trembling hands. One of the dragons raises its head, forked tongue tasting the air. Sampling her fear, she freezes, balanced on rocks slippery with centuries of condensation, and you feel her despair settling in like winter cold. There's no clever trick here, no waiting for the right moment. This task requires either divine intervention or accepting failure. Zeus's eagle appears then, descending from the heavens on wings that span twice your height. This is the same eagle that once carried Zeus's thunderbolts, that stole Ganymede from Troy's fields to serve as cupbearer to the gods. It's a creature of legend, and it takes the crystal jar from Psyche's shaking hands with surprising gentleness, gripping it in talons that could shred bronze. The eagle knows these mountains, has flown over this stream 1,000 times while running errands for the king of gods. It swoops down to the water source with casual confidence, the dragons parting before it. Even serpents know better than to challenge Zeus's favourite messenger. The jar fills with black water that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the eagle returns, placing it carefully in Psyche's hands before launching skyward without a sound. Some scholars interpret the eagle's intervention as Zeus showing support for true love, perhaps remembering his own numerous romantic pursuits. Others suggest it represents Eros calling in favours from his grandfather, working behind the scenes despite his mother's fury. A few fringe theorists claim the eagle itself represents wisdom, the ability to soar above problems and find solutions invisible from ground level. Whatever the truth, Psyche has completed 3 impossible tasks, and Aphrodite's rage is reaching critical mass. The goddess snatches the jar of shadow water, and for a moment you think you see genuine worry flicker across her perfect features. Psyche is succeeding where she should fail, surviving where she should perish. Aphrodite realizes she needs to design a task not just impossible but fatal, something that will remove this mortal thorn from her divine side permanently. One final errand, Aphrodite says, and her smile is a predator's smile, all teeth and anticipation. Descend to the underworld itself, go to Persephone, queen of the dead, and ask her for a box of her beauty. Tell her Aphrodite has worn herself out dealing with her lovesick son and needs a small portion of Persephone's beauty to restore herself. You feel the blood drain from Psyche's face. The other tasks were dangerous, yes, but this is death itself. Mortals don't visit the underworld and return, that's definitional. It's the one-way journey everyone takes eventually, and Aphrodite has essentially ordered Psyche to die. There's no helper animal for this, no natural force that can guide the way. This is the ultimate test, and it's designed to be failed. Psyche walks from Aphrodite's temple in a daze, her mind turning over possibilities and finding nothing but dead ends. She climbs a high tower, planning to throw herself from it if she must descend to the underworld. She reasons she might as well choose her method of arrival. It's dark logic, born from exhausted desperation, and you want to stop her, but the story pulls you forward relentlessly. The tower itself speaks. Voices from the stones, or perhaps the spirit of the place. Accumulated wisdom soaked into mortar over years. Offer guidance. Don't jump. The tower whispers, there's a path to the underworld that living souls can walk, though few know it and fewer dare attempt it. The tower tells Psyche of a cave in Laconia, near the ancient city of Sparta, where a passage leads down into shadow. It gives her detailed instructions. Take 2 coins for Charon the ferryman. Take 2 pieces of barley bread soaked in honey to pacify Cerberus the 3-headed guard dog. And above all, ignore every plea for help she encounters along the way. The underworld is full of traps disguised as compassion, tests masquerading as emergencies. Most importantly, the tower warns. When Persephone gives you the box of beauty, do not open it. Keep it sealed, no matter how curious you become. Curiosity has already cost you once. Don't let it destroy you a second time. Archaeological evidence suggests the ancient Greeks really did believe in physical entrances to the underworld. Several caves across Greece were considered portals to the realm of Hades, with the one at Cape Tainaron in Laconia being among the most famous. People left offerings at these sites, and mystery cults performed initiations in underground chambers to simulate the journey of death and rebirth. The myth preserves real religious practices wrapped in narrative form. Psyche gathers her supplies, coins, honey bread, courage, and finds the cave as the tower described. The entrance yawns in the hillside like a mouth frozen mid-scream, and cool air flows from its depths, carrying the smell of earth and endings. She lights a torch and begins her descent, leaving the world of sunlight behind, with each step downward into darkness that predates darkness, silence that predates sound. The path winds through stone corridors where water drips with metronomic precision, marking time in a place where time shouldn't exist. You walk beside Psyche, feeling the weight of rock overhead, the pressure of earth that hasn't seen sky since the world was young. Strange sounds echo from side passages, whispers, sighs, the rustle of movement just beyond the torchlight's reach. The first test arrives quickly. A lame donkey appears, struggling with a load of sticks, its driver calling out for help, adjusting the burden. Every instinct screams at Psyche to assist. It would take mere seconds, cost nothing. Surely helping couldn't hurt. But she remembers the tower's warning and walks past, hardening her heart against compassion. This isn't cruelty, it's survival. The underworld tests the living in subtle ways, trying to trap them through their own goodness. Further down, she reaches the river Styx itself, that dark water she gathered from earlier now flowing in its full terrible glory. The river moves sluggishly, thick as oil, and souls of the dead float in it like pale fish, their faces turned upward with empty eyes. Charon the ferryman waits in his boat, an ancient figure bent with ages of service. His face hidden in the cowl so deep you can't see features, only shadow. Psyche places a coin in his palm without touching his skin. The coin feels cold, reluctant to leave her hand, as if it knows once spent here it can never return to the world above. Charon poles the boat across in silence. The only sound the water lapping against wood and the distant wailing of souls who cannot pay, who must wander the shores for eternity. It's a reminder that even in death, there's inequality. Those who can afford burial rites get passage, while the poor remain stranded. The far shore rises grey and unwelcoming. Cerberus waits there, the monstrous guardian of Death's Gate, and you hear him before you see him, 3 sets of growls harmonizing into a chord of menace. When he emerges from shadow, he's larger than myth prepared you for. Each of his 3 heads is the size of a bull's, with fangs like ivory daggers and eyes that glow dull red. Serpents writhe in his mane, hissing their own warnings, and his tail is a dragon's tail, lashing with irritation. Psyche throws 1 piece of honey bread to the ground. The middle head dips to eat it, and the other two heads immediately turn on their sibling, snarling jealously. In the chaos of their fighting, Psyche slips past, her heart hammering so loud you're certain the dog will hear it. But Cerberus is too busy with his honey-soaked bread and internecine squabbling to notice one small mortal scurrying into the realm of the dead. The palace of Hades and Persephone rises before you like a monument to inevitability itself. Its walls are constructed from stones that seem to absorb light, and torches burn with cold flames that provide illumination without warmth. This is the administrative centre of death, where every mortal's final destination is recorded, sorted, and assigned. The architecture is beautiful in a spare, geometric way. No unnecessary ornamentation, just function carved into permanence. It's rather like walking into the world's most depressing government building. If that building happened to rule over infinity, Persephone receives Psyche in a throne room where the ceiling disappears into darkness overhead. The queen of the underworld is surprisingly young-looking, her beauty different from Aphrodite's, less radiant, more haunting, the loveliness of autumn rather than spring. She wears a crown of silver fashioned like pomegranate branches, a reminder of the seeds that bind her to this realm half the year. There's sympathy in her eyes when she looks at Psyche. She knows what it's like to be a pawn in divine games, to have your life rearranged by more powerful beings. Aphrodite sent you. Persephone's voice carries the echo of countless souls sighing. How typical of her, using a mortal to run errands that inconvenience no one but the messenger. She gestures, and an ornate box appears, small enough to fit in your palm, made of ebony and sealed with gold clasps. Here is what she requested, but I must warn you, mortal, some gifts from the dead are more dangerous than curses. Psyche accepts the box with trembling hands, bowing deeply in gratitude. Persephone offers her a place at the table, a spread of fruits and bread and wine that looks surprisingly appetizing for food from the land of the dead. But Psyche remembers the rules, the warnings. Eat nothing in the underworld, or you'll be bound here as Persephone herself was bound by 6 pomegranate seeds. She politely declines, and you see approval flicker across the queen's face. This mortal girl is learning the hard way how to navigate divine treachery. The return journey reverses the descent. Psyche throws her second piece of honey bread to Cerberus, slipping past while the 3 heads fight over it with renewed enthusiasm. She pays Charon a second coin, though the ferryman's expression never changes. You sense something that might be respect in the way he poles the boat just slightly faster this time. The climb back through the cave is longer than the descent, or perhaps it just feels that way now that hope is within reach. When Psyche finally emerges into sunlight, she gasps like a drowning swimmer breaking the surface. The world of the living has never looked more beautiful. Colours seem brighter. Air tastes sweeter. Even the ordinary rocks and scrubby plants appear miraculous after a grey monotony of Death's kingdom. She's accomplished the impossible. She's walked into the underworld and returned alive, carrying a piece of Persephone's beauty for a goddess who doesn't need it. But here, at the moment of triumph, Psyche makes her second fatal mistake. She looks at the box in her hands and thinks, what if I opened it? Just a crack. What if I borrowed a tiny portion of this beauty before delivering it to Aphrodite? Eros fell in love with her once, but she's been through so much, climbing mountains, gathering fleece, descending to death itself. She's exhausted, filthy, worn down to her bones. Surely a little of Persephone's beauty would help her win him back completely. Curiosity killed more than the cat in Greek mythology. It's the recurring theme. The serpent in every garden. You want to shout at Psyche to remember the tower's warning, to resist just this one last temptation. But the story doesn't work that way. Tragedies require tragic choices, and Psyche has been pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. She opens the box, There's no beauty inside, at least no beauty meant for the living. What spills out is a Stygian sleep, the sleep of the dead themselves, heavy and absolute. It wraps around Psyche like invisible chains and pulls her down, into unconsciousness so profound it's indistinguishable from death. She collapses on the hillside path, the box rolling from her slack fingers, and lies there unmoving as a corpse. The tragic irony would be almost funny if it weren't so devastating. She survived the underworld only to be killed by what she brought back from it. But love, it turns out, has been watching. Eros has recovered from his oil burn wound, and more importantly, he's recovered from his anger. He's spent weeks hidden away in his mother's palace, sulking and healing, but his heart has been breaking piece by piece, knowing what tasks Aphrodite set for Psyche. Divine love might be powerful, but it's also patient, waiting for the right moment to intervene. Some scholars suggest this delay represents emotional maturity. Eros needed time to understand his own feelings before he could properly fight for them. He finds Psyche lying on the path like a fallen statue, and grief crashes through him like a physical force. He kneels beside her, gathering her into his arms, and carefully wipes the sleep from her skin, catching it on an arrow's tip and returning it to the box. It's delicate work, dangerous work. One wrong move and the sleep could claim him too, but love makes you careful with what you care about, precise in ways self-interest never demands. Psyche's eyes flutter open. She sees Eros's face, properly sees it this time in full daylight, with permission, and you watch recognition bloom into joy. "I'm sorry," they say simultaneously, and it's almost comical how they both scramble to apologize first, to claim responsibility, to shoulder blame that maybe should be shared equally between impulsive curiosity and secretive necessity. "Finish your task," Eros tells her gently, pressing the sealed box back into her hands. "Take this to my mother. I'll handle the rest." And handle it he does, with spectacular dramatic flair. Eros flies directly to Mount Olympus, bypassing protocol and propriety, and throws himself on Zeus's mercy. The king of the gods is in one of his expansive moods. He's had a good breakfast. There are no major wars requiring his attention, and he's always had a soft spot for romance, being rather fond of it himself despite Hera's frequent objections. "My dear boy," Zeus booms, his voice carrying the weight of storm clouds. "You want to marry a mortal. Do you understand the complications? The paperwork alone is nightmarish." It's the kind of joke gods make when they're about to grant a favour but want to pretend it's a big imposition. Eros argues his case. Psyche has proven herself through impossible tasks, shown devotion beyond what any deity could expect, survived literal death for love. She's earned the right to be more than mortal. Plus, and this party delivers with a knowing smile, if Zeus grants this favour, Eros will owe him one. The god of love being indebted to the king of gods? That's currency Zeus can spend in interesting ways. Zeus calls a council of all the Olympians. Even Aphrodite attends, though her face could curdle milk at a distance. Historians still argue whether this assembly represents real religious practice. Did ancient Greeks actually believe the gods convened like a cosmic committee? Or whether it's purely narrative device? Either way, Zeus makes his pronouncement with the gravitas of someone who knows he's making mythological history. Psyche has earned immortality through her trials. Zeus declares, "Let her drink ambrosia and nectar. Let her become as we are, and let these two lovers finally unite properly." He emphasizes that last word with a meaningful look at Aphrodite, whose machinations have delayed this union long enough. Hermes, the messenger god with winged sandals and a mischievous grin, personally escorts Psyche to Olympus. The journey up through clouds and beyond sky is dizzying, reality growing thin and strange as you ascend to the realm where physics takes suggestions rather than orders. The palace of the gods makes Psyche's temporary palace look like a garden shed. This is architecture on a scale that makes humans feel appropriately insignificant, Psyche drinks from a golden cup filled with ambrosia that tastes like every perfect moment you've ever experienced distilled into liquid form, and nectar that fizzes on the tongue like starlight made tangible. You feel the change ripple through her, cells reorganizing, mortality burning away like morning mist, time losing its grip on her flesh. She's becoming something other, something more. Wings sprout from her shoulder blades, delicate and butterfly-like. Because what else would the soul grow when freed from human limitations? Her name means soul, after all, and now her form matches the meaning. The wedding celebration that follows is legendary even by divine standards. All the Olympians attend, yes, even Aphrodite, who's been thoroughly overruled and now must make the best of a situation she can't control. She wears a smile that doesn't reach her eyes and gives a gift that's probably cursed in subtle ways no one will discover for centuries. Apollo plays his lyre, and the music makes flowers bloom out of season. The muses sing in 9-part harmony that would make mortal composers weep with inadequacy. Dionysus provides wine that tastes different to each drinker, perfectly calibrated to their preference. It's the kind of party that makes every other party in history look like a disappointing potluck. Eros and Psyche are married properly this time, with witnesses and daylight and no secrets between them. Their daughter, born some months later, is named Hedone, literally pleasure in Greek, and she becomes a minor goddess representing the joy that comes from consummated love. It's a happy ending, rare in Greek mythology, where most romances end in transformation, death, or both. Some scholars suggest this tale was deliberately structured as a counterpoint to tragedy, offering hope that love could overcome divine opposition if both parties were willing to fight for it. Do you remember when Psyche first opened that lamp and destroyed paradise? The story has come full circle. Curiosity caused the fall, but persistence earned redemption. It's a gentler moral than most Greek myths offer, suggesting that mistakes aren't necessarily permanent, that some relationships can survive even catastrophic breaches of trust if both people want them to badly enough. But love doesn't always end with such grace, does it? Sometimes it ends with running, with transformation, with desperate prayers for escape. Let's follow another thread of cursed love. This one beginning not with divine command, but with divine pride wounded by rejection. You find yourself walking through the forests of Thessaly, where the sun god Apollo strides between trees with his usual golden radiance. Apollo is the god of music, poetry, prophecy, and healing, basically the overachiever of Olympus, the deity who's good at everything and knows it. He's handsome in that classical way, all perfect proportions and luminous skin, the kind of beauty that gets carved into marble and copied for centuries. He's never been rejected, never known what it means to want something he can't have. That's about to change. He spots Daphne bathing in a stream, and it's like a lightning strike to his divine heart. She's a nymph, daughter of the river god Peneus, and her beauty is the wild, untamed kind, not the cultivated perfection of Olympian goddesses, but something raw and free. Her hair hangs wet down her back like dark water, and she moves through the stream with unself-conscious grace, completely unaware she's being watched. Here's where the story gets complicated, because there are different versions, and they paint Apollo in very different lights. In some tellings, Apollo simply falls in love at first sight, his attraction instant and overwhelming. But in other versions, often considered older, Eros is involved, shooting Apollo with a golden arrow of passion while simultaneously striking Daphne with a lead arrow of revulsion. It's revenge, you see, for Apollo mocking Eros's archery skills, suggesting that love's weapons are childish toys compared to Apollo's god-slaying arrows. Never insult the god of love, apparently, because he'll make you fall for someone who finds you repulsive, and he'll laugh while you suffer. Whichever version you prefer, the result is the same. Apollo desires Daphne with sudden, consuming intensity, and Daphne wants nothing to do with him. Apollo approaches her with what he probably thinks is charming confidence. "Beautiful nymph," he calls out, his voice melodious, because even casual speech from the god of music sounds like song. "Don't run from me. I'm not some mortal farmer or shepherd. I'm Apollo, son of Zeus, lord of Delphi, master of the silver bow. I can offer you immortality, worship, temples in your name." It's quite the sales pitch, really, like someone listing their accomplishments on a dating profile. Assuming credentials equal attraction. But Daphne sees a powerful male pursuing her, sees her freedom about to be swallowed by his desire, and she does the only thing that makes sense to her. She runs, Apollo chases, because apparently taking no for an answer isn't in the divine vocabulary. He calls after her as she flees through the forest, listing more of his achievements as if her reluctance stems from not fully understanding his resume. "I am the god of prophecy. I know the future. I can heal any wound. Why do you flee from me?" The chase is deeply uncomfortable, if you think about it for more than a moment. Here's a powerful deity pursuing a terrified nymph who's made her lack of consent abundantly clear, and he's treating it like a game, like courtship, like something romantic instead of the assault it actually is. Ancient audiences might have viewed this differently. The Romans particularly loved chase and transformation narratives, but modern readers often find Apollo's behaviour horrifying rather than heroic. Historians still argue whether these myths reflect real social attitudes about consent, or whether they're cautionary tales about the abuse of power. Daphne runs faster, her bare feet flying over roots and stones. Her breath comes in gasps, lungs burning, and you feel her terror as Apollo gains ground. He's a god, after all, tireless and supernaturally swift. The distance between them shrinks metre by metre, and she knows she can't outrun him forever. Her father's river is ahead, the waters that share her father's name, and she screams out a prayer as she runs. "Father, if your waters hold any power, any love for me, change this form that pleases too well. Let me escape this shape that brings such danger." It's a prayer born from desperation, the kind of plea you make when the alternative is worse than any transformation could be. She's asking to stop being herself rather than submit to Apollo's pursuit, and that choice says everything about how threatened she feels. Some feminist scholars interpret Daphne's transformation as the ultimate assertion of bodily autonomy. She chooses to become something other than human rather than be possessed by someone she doesn't want. The river god Peneus hears his daughter's prayer and grants it with the grief of a father who sees no better option. You watch the transformation ripple through Daphne's body, starting from her feet. Her toes dig into earth and keep digging, extending downward as roots, spreading wide and anchoring deep. Her legs fuse together, hardening into trunk, skin roughening into bark. Her arms lift towards sky and branches sprout from her fingertips, multiplying, subdividing, reaching upward in green supplication. Her hair becomes leaves, rustling in the wind with a sound like whispered secrets. Her face elongates, features smoothing into wood grain, eyes becoming knots that might still see, mouth becoming a hollow that might still speak if wind passes through it correctly. In seconds, Daphne the nymph has become a laurel tree, slender and graceful, forever frozen in the posture of flight, her wooden form still leaning away from where Apollo stands. Apollo reaches the tree and stumbles to a halt, his hand extended to grab what's no longer there. His fingers touch bark instead of skin, and the horror of realization crosses his divine face. He's won the chase but lost everything. Daphne has escaped him so completely she's left the realm of beings he could possibly possess. You watch him press his palm against the trunk, and he swears he can feel a heartbeat in the wood, blood sap still pumping beneath the bark. "If you cannot be my bride," Apollo says, his voice breaking in a way gods' voices shouldn't break, "then you will be my tree. You will be sacred to me. forever. He breaks off a branch, and you wince, wondering if Daphne can still feel pain in this form, and weaves it into a crown for his golden hair. From this day forward, laurel will crown victors, will adorn my temples, will mark achievement and triumph. You fled from me, but your form will celebrate every victory for all time. It's meant to be romantic, perhaps, this declaration of eternal devotion. But there's something deeply unsettling about it, isn't there? Daphne said no in the most definitive way possible, by ceasing to exist as a being he could pursue, and Apollo's response is to claim her anyway, to make her rejection into his symbol. He's turned her escape into his accessory, her trauma into his fashion statement. The laurel crown becomes the mark of winners at the Pythian Games, at poetic competitions, at military triumphs. For thousands of years, people wore Daphne's transformed body on their heads to celebrate achievement, never knowing they were wearing a monument to refusal. Archaeological evidence shows laurel was indeed sacred to Apollo across the Greek world. His temple at Delphi was surrounded by laurel groves, and the Pythia, the famous oracle, chewed laurel leaves before delivering prophecies. Whether this practice predated the myth or the myth explained the practice remains scholarly debate. Some fringe theorists suggest Daphne represents an older pre-Greek nature deity whose worship was absorbed into Apollo's cult. Her transformation symbolizing the replacement of one religious system with another. The laurel tree still grows in that spot. According to legend, near the river Peneus in Thessaly, ancient travellers claimed they could hear it rustling differently than other trees, as if it was still trying to speak, still trying to say no in the only language left to it. Apollo visits it sometimes, bringing offerings, speaking to the bark as if conversation might still be possible. He never understands, or refuses to understand, that Daphne's transformation wasn't a tragic accident but a deliberate choice. That she preferred becoming a tree to becoming his. This cursed love leaves no happy ending, no divine marriage, no children to carry forward the story. It leaves only a tree that marks the spot where consent died, and a god who learned nothing from rejection, except that he could make rejection beautiful and call it devotion. It's one of the darker myths when you strip away the poetic language and look at the skeleton of the story underneath. But if Apollo's love was poisoned by entitlement, our next tale shows what happens when love is poisoned by death itself, when devotion becomes so absolute that it tries to overturn the fundamental laws of reality. You're about to witness love that's pure and genuine and doomed anyway, proving that sometimes good intentions pave roads straight to heartbreak. You find yourself at a wedding in Thrace, where the air smells of wild roses and honey wine. Musicians tune their instruments, guests gather in festive clothing, and the bride, Eurydice, looks radiant in her white robes, flowers woven through her dark hair. She's marrying Orpheus, the legendary musician whose songs can charm stones into dancing and rivers into changing course. He's the son of the muse Calliope, inheriting divine musical talent, and his lyre playing is famous throughout the ancient world. They're desperately in love, these two, in that uncomplicated way that feels almost naive in retrospect. Orpheus composes songs just for Eurydice, melodies that capture the exact shade of her laugh, the particular way sunlight catches in her eyes. She listens to his music with rapt attention, understanding somehow what he's saying even when he uses no words, just notes that cascade like water over stones. They're the kind of couple that makes other people simultaneously envious and slightly nauseated by their mutual adoration. The wedding ceremony proceeds beautifully. Hymeneos, the god of marriage, is invoked, though some storytellers claim his torch sputters and smokes instead of burning bright, an omen everyone ignores because surely nothing could go wrong on such a perfect day. Vows are exchanged, wine is shared, and as the sun begins its descent toward evening, the celebration moves from formal ritual into festive chaos. Music plays, people dance, and Orpheus himself performs, his fingers coaxing magic from his lyre strings. Eurydice slips away from the crowd as twilight deepens, wanting a moment of quiet after the overwhelming joy of the day. She walks through a meadow near the celebration, her sandals swishing through tall grass, breathing in the cooling air. She's thinking about her future, about the life she'll build with Orpheus, about the children they might have, the songs yet to be written. The world feels limitless with possibility. She doesn't see the snake until her foot comes down wrong. The viper strikes faster than thought, fangs sinking into her ankle, pumping venom that burns like liquid fire through her veins. Eurydice stumbles, crying out, and reaches down to clutch her leg. The snake slithers away, indifferent to the catastrophe it's caused. Snakes don't understand weddings or promises or futures about to be destroyed. It was simply defending itself, simply being what snakes are. The venom works quickly because this is tragedy, and tragedy doesn't waste time. By the time the wedding guests find Eurydice collapsed in the grass, her lips are already turning blue, her breathing shallow and rapid. Orpheus reaches her and drops to his knees, cradling her head, and you can hear his denial. No, not today, not now, this can't happen. But biology doesn't care about timing. Eurydice looks up at her husband of mere hours, tries to speak his name, and dies before the word can fully form. The celebration transforms into mourning so abruptly it gives you whiplash. The same flowers decorating joy now decorate grief. The same musicians who played wedding songs now play dirges. Orpheus holds Eurydice's body and makes sounds that aren't quite music, aren't quite screaming, something raw and broken that no human throat should produce. It's the sound of a soul tearing, and everyone who hears it wishes they hadn't. Historical records actually document the danger of venomous snakes in ancient Greece, particularly vipers in rural areas. Wedding celebrations often extended into meadows and fields where such creatures lived, and deaths from snake bites weren't uncommon. The myth takes a realistic danger and elevates it to cosmic tragedy. But the core fear that joy could be snatched away in an instant by something small and venomous reflects genuine ancient anxieties. They burn Eurydice's body on a pyre that very night, because in the Mediterranean heat, bodies can't wait. Orpheus watches the flames consume his bride, his lyre hanging silent in his hands, and he makes a decision that will define the rest of his short, tragic life. He will go to the underworld and bring her back. Everyone tells Orpheus this is madness. Of course. The dead don't return. That's the fundamental rule separating existence from non-existence. The boundary that makes life precious and death permanent. His mother Calliope pleads with him to grieve properly, to write songs of mourning, to eventually heal and perhaps love again. His father, accounts differ on whether it's the Thracian king Eros or the god Apollo himself, urges him to accept what cannot be changed, but grief has made Orpheus irrational in the way only love can, and he's determined to attempt the impossible because the alternative is living without Eurydice, which feels more impossible still. He takes only his lyre and begins the journey to the underworld, following paths that living feet rarely tread, unlike Psyche, who had a tower's wisdom to guide her. Orpheus walks on instinct and desperation, following streams that run the wrong direction, descending into caves where daylight fears to reach. His music is his map. He plays as he walks, and the notes seem to know where death lives, pulling him deeper into shadow and stone. The entrance to the underworld opens before him, like a wound in the world, and Orpheus descends without hesitation. The darkness here is absolute, the kind that exists before light was invented, and your eyes strain uselessly trying to penetrate it. But Orpheus doesn't need eyes, he has music, and he begins to play in earnest now. his lyre singing out melodies of loss and longing that would make granite weep if granite had tear ducts. The first challenge is the river Styx, where Charon the ferryman waits in his eternal vigil. Charon has refused countless souls who arrived without payment, has turned away kings and heroes and beggars with equal indifference. But when Orpheus plays, something shifts in the ancient ferryman's posture. The music speaks of love so profound it challenges death itself. And even Charon, who has witnessed every form of human suffering, finds himself moved. He gestures Orpheus onto the boat without demanding coin, poles across the dark water while the music continues, and you swear you see something like a tear tracking down his hidden face. Cerberus waits on the far shore, 3 sets of jaws ready to rend living flesh from living bone. The monstrous guardian has never let a living soul pass into the realm of the dead. It is his entire purpose, the reason Hades created him. But Orpheus plays a lullaby, gentle and soothing, and one by one the great heads begin to droop. The serpents in Cerberus's mane grow still, their hissing fading to silence. The dragon tail stops its aggressive lashing. The enormous dog lies down, all 3 heads resting on massive paws, and begins to snore in a rumbling chorus that shakes the ground. It's rather endearing. Actually, this terrifying guardian reduced to a sleepy puppy by the right melody. Orpheus walks past while the monster dreams, deeper into the underworld where the dead exist in their grey eternity. Shades of the deceased gather around him as he plays, drawn to the music like moths to flame. These are souls beyond suffering, beyond joy, beyond most emotions entirely. The dead in Greek mythology aren't tortured or rewarded. They simply exist in diminished form, shadows of their living selves. But Orpheus's music reaches something dormant in them, and they remember what it felt like to feel, to hope, to love. They weep without tears, these dead, mourning their own lost vitality, even the tormented pause in their eternal punishments. Tantalus, forever reaching for water that recedes and fruit that lifts away, stops trying and simply listens. Sisyphus lets his boulder roll back down the hill and sits on it like a stool, head cocked to better hear the melody. The Danaids, condemned to fill leaking jars for eternity, set down their vessels and close their eyes. Ixion's burning wheel stops spinning for the duration of Orpheus's song. Even the damned find respite, and you wonder if that's cruelty or mercy, to remind them of beauty they can never fully experience again. Historians still argue whether these punishment myths represent genuine Greek belief about the afterlife or were later additions influenced by other cultures. Some scholars suggest they're metaphorical, Sisyphus representing futile labour, Tantalus representing unfulfilled desire. Others point to similarities with Egyptian and Mesopotamian afterlife concepts, suggesting cross-cultural exchange of religious ideas. A few fringe theorists claim the punishments describe altered states of consciousness achieved through mystery cult rituals, symbolic deaths experienced by initiates. The music draws Orpheus onward to the throne room of Hades and Persephone, the king and queen of the dead. Hades sits in shadow, his face stern as the judgment he dispenses, his realm's crown heavy on his brow. Persephone sits beside him, and though she rules here with authority, there's still something of spring in her eyes, a memory of sunlight and growing things. She looks at Orpheus with immediate sympathy. She knows what it's like to be taken from the world above, to have life interrupted by death's claim. Orpheus falls to his knees before them and plays the most beautiful song ever created. He plays his love for Eurydice, translating emotion into melody, the first moment he saw her, the first time she smiled at him, the first kiss they shared, the wedding that became a funeral. He plays his grief, raw and unfiltered, notes that scrape like broken glass. He plays his desperation, his refusal to accept this ending, his willingness to face any challenge, endure any hardship, if they'll only return his bride to him. The lyre sings of life's brevity and beauty's fragility, of how love makes us vulnerable precisely because it makes us care so deeply about something we cannot control or protect. It's music that transcends technique and becomes pure feeling made audible, and you feel tears streaming down your face though you're not sure when you started crying. Persephone weeps openly, her tears falling like rain that will never nourish the world above. Even Hades, stern, unbending Hades who has refused every plea for mercy since time began, feels something shift in his immortal chest. He looks at his wife, remembers when Demeter begged for Persephone's return, remembers Zeus forcing him to compromise and release her for half the year. He knows what it means to love someone claimed by a realm not their own. "Your music moves even death," Hades says, his voice like grinding stone. "I will grant your request. Eurydice may follow you back to the world of the living." Orpheus's face transforms with joy so intense it's almost painful to witness. He starts to stand, ready to search the shadowy halls for his beloved. But Hades raises one hand, and the gesture freezes Orpheus mid-movement. "There is a condition," Hades continues, and those 4 words carry the weight of inevitable tragedy. "Eurydice will walk behind you as you ascend. You must not look back at her, not once, not for any reason, until you both stand fully in the sunlight of the upper world. If you look back even once before then, she returns to me forever." It's a seemingly simple condition, the kind that sounds easy until you actually try to follow it. Don't look back. Just walk forward. Trust that she's there, and don't turn around. What could be simpler? But the condition is specifically designed to test faith, to probe the exact weakness that doubt creates, and Hades knows it. Some versions of the myth suggest he's being genuinely merciful within his constraints. He's giving Orpheus a real chance, just one hedged with difficulty. Other interpretations suggest he's being cruel, offering hope while engineering failure, knowing the condition is psychologically almost impossible to maintain. Eurydice appears from the shadows, her form translucent and insubstantial, more ghost than woman. She looks confused, as the dead always do when summoned back toward life. But when she sees Orpheus, her shade face brightens with recognition and something like hope. She reaches toward him, but her fingers pass through air where his should be. She cannot touch him yet, not while she remains technically dead, caught between realms. The frustration of being so close yet unable to make contact is visible in every line of her ephemeral form. Orpheus begins the ascent, his lyre clutched in trembling hands. He doesn't play now. He needs all his concentration for the simple act of walking forward without looking back. Behind him, he hears the whisper of Eurydice's footsteps, so quiet they might be imagination, might be wind through underground passages, might be his desperate hope manifesting as audible illusion. The sound is his only evidence that she's actually following, that this isn't an elaborate, cruel joke played by death itself. The path seems infinitely longer climbing up than it was descending. Every step is an act of faith, every moment a test of trust. Orpheus's neck muscles ache from the effort of keeping his head forward, fighting the overwhelming urge to verify that Eurydice is truly there. What if she's not following? What if she can't follow? What if the shades of the dead trapped her, jealous of her escape? What if she stumbled and fell and is calling out to him but he can't hear? You walk behind Orpheus, watching his shoulders tense with the effort of not turning, seeing his head twitch involuntarily towards sounds that might or might not be Eurydice. The darkness pressing in from all sides doesn't help, without visual confirmation. Doubt grows like mould in damp places, spreading quickly and poisoning everything it touches. Trust becomes harder to maintain with each step, each second, each heartbeat that pounds so loud it drowns out the footsteps he's straining to hear. The tunnel begins to slope upward more steeply. Orpheus's legs burn with exertion. His breath comes harder, and the physical discomfort adds another layer of difficulty to the mental torture. He's counting steps in his head, trying to estimate how far he's come, how far remains, but he lost count somewhere around 300 and now has no reference point. Time distorts in the darkness. Has he been climbing for hours or minutes? Is the exit close or impossibly distant? Behind him, the footsteps continue their whisper-soft patter. Or do they? Sometimes Orpheus is certain he hears them, clear as anything. Other times there's only silence, and panic spikes through him like lightning. Has she stopped? Has she fallen? Has she been reclaimed by death while he walks obliviously forward? The uncertainty is a special kind of torture, designed to erode confidence with surgical precision. Scholars debate whether this test represents divine mercy or divine cruelty. Some argue that Hades is being generous. He could have simply refused Orpheus entirely, but instead offers a genuine chance at reunion. The condition is difficult but not impossible, requiring only faith and self-control. Others counter that the condition is deliberately designed to exploit human psychology, that Hades knows doubt is intrinsic to mortal nature, and has essentially guaranteed failure while maintaining plausible deniability about his mercy. A few interpreters suggest the test isn't about Orpheus at all, but about Eurydice. If she's strong enough to follow, determined enough to return to life, then she deserves the chance. Orpheus passes Cerberus again, still sleeping his musically induced slumber. The dog's rumbling snores provide a reference point, evidence of progress. And for a moment Orpheus feels hope surge through him. He's made it this far. Surely the exit can't be much farther. He just needs to maintain control a little longer. Keep faith for a few more minutes. Resist the urge to confirm what he desperately needs to know. The river Styx approaches, and Charon waits with his boat. The ferryman's presence is both reassuring, marking measurable progress, and terrifying because the boat crossing will separate Orpheus from Eurydice's footsteps entirely. The sound of water lapping against wood will drown out any evidence of her presence. He'll have to cross in complete acoustic isolation from the only confirmation he has that she exists behind him. Orpheus steps into the boat, feeling it rock beneath his weight. He positions himself facing forward, gripping the sides so hard his knuckles turn white. Charon begins to pole across the dark water, and the liquid sounds fill the air, masking everything else. Orpheus cannot hear footsteps now, cannot hear breathing, cannot hear anything except water and wood and his own hammering heart. Is Eurydice in the boat? Is she on the shore, unable to follow? Has she been there at all? Or has he been climbing alone this entire time, victim of a cosmic prank? The crossing takes forever and no time at all. When the boat touches the far shore, the shore closer to life, to light, to the world above, Orpheus practically leaps out. Desperate to escape the sensory deprivation the water imposed, his feet find solid ground, and he resumes walking. Faster now, urgency overriding caution. The exit must be close. He can feel it, can almost taste fresh air mixing with the stale underground atmosphere. And there, yes, there ahead, a point of light, dim and distant but unmistakably real. Sunlight, actual sunlight, penetrating down through the cave entrance, promising the world of the living. Orpheus's pace increases further, his exhausted legs finding new strength born from proximity to success. The light grows brighter as he climbs, expanding from a pinpoint to a coin-sized circle to a door-sized opening, and the sweetness of approaching victory floods through him. But with the light comes a new torture. He can now see his own shadow stretching behind him on the stone, cast by the sunlight ahead. His shadow is singular, solitary, unaccompanied by any second shadow that would prove Eurydice is truly following. The visual evidence contradicts the faith he's maintained for so long, and doubt crashes through him like a tsunami, sweeping away all his careful resolve. What if she's not there? What if she never was? What if the gods lied, giving him hope just to make the disappointment more exquisite? He's seconds from success, mere steps from fulfilling the condition. But the lack of a second shadow screams at him that he's been deceived, that he's about to emerge alone and discover he climbed for nothing, trusted for nothing, suffered for nothing. The exit is right there. So close he can feel genuine warmth from the sun, can see individual leaves on trees outside, can hear birds singing their oblivious songs. Just a few more steps and he'll be free. They'll both be free. They can begin again. But the doubt has reached critical mass, has become too heavy to carry, and Orpheus makes the fatal decision that will echo through eternity. He looks back. The moment his eyes move, time seems to slow down, stretching the catastrophe across endless seconds so you can witness every detail of the destruction. Orpheus's head turns, his neck muscles finally surrendering to the unbearable pressure of doubt, and his gaze travels backward along the path he's climbed. For one perfect, terrible moment, he sees her. Eurydice is there. She was always there, following faithfully just a few steps behind him, her shade form more solid than it was in the depths, beginning to regain colour and substance as life's proximity works its slow magic. Their eyes meet. Recognition flares between them, love and relief and joy all compressed into a single heartbeat. Eurydice's lips form his name, and you can see in her expression that she understands they've almost made it. They're almost safe. They're almost together again. Then the condition breaks like a shattered mirror, and everything falls apart. Eurydice's form begins to fade immediately, transparency returning, solidity draining away like water through cupped hands. Her expression shifts from joy to confusion to heartbreak, to despair in rapid succession, each emotion flickering across her disappearing features. She reaches toward Orpheus, her hand extended in supplication or farewell, but her fingers dissolve into mist before they can bridge the distance between them. Her mouth moves, forming words, maybe goodbye, maybe I love you, maybe why. But no sound emerges because she's already more absence than presence. Eurydice! Orpheus lunges toward her, trying to grab her vanishing form, but his hands close on empty air. He's still technically in the cave, still technically in the underworld's domain, and the broken condition has teeth. The laws of death reassert themselves with brutal finality, reclaiming what was temporarily loaned, pulling Eurydice back down into shadow with inexorable force. She doesn't fight it, there's no point fighting inevitability. Her last visible expression is one of profound sadness, not for herself, but for Orpheus, for the torture of almost that will haunt him forever. Then she's gone completely, drawn back down into the depths like smoke sucked down a drain, and Orpheus is left grasping at nothing, screaming her name into emptiness that doesn't answer. He tries to follow her back down. Of course he does. What else would love do in that moment? But the path has closed behind him, grown impassable in the way dreams become impassable when you try to return to them. Cerberus is awake now and angry, all three heads snarling warnings that even grief-maddened Orpheus understands mean certain death. Charon's boat remains on the far shore of the Styx, and the ferryman shakes his head slowly. There are no second chances, no do-overs, no loopholes in the laws that govern death. Orpheus staggers the final steps into sunlight that feels like mockery now, like a spotlight illuminating failure. He collapses just outside the cave entrance, the lyre falling from nerveless fingers, and makes sounds that transcend weeping into something more primal. He was so close. Mere steps from success, seconds from reunion, and his doubt destroyed everything. The tragedy isn't that he looked back, is that he looked back when looking forward for just a moment longer would have saved them both. Some scholars interpret this as commentary on faith and human weakness, that we're fundamentally incapable of trust without verification, that doubt is intrinsic to mortal psychology. Others read it as critique of the gods' cruelty, setting conditions specifically designed to exploit human nature and then punishing inevitable failure. Feminist readings sometimes focus on Eurydice's agency, or lack thereof, in the story, noting that she's essentially a prize to be won or lost. Her desires subordinate to Orpheus's quest and Hades's conditions. A few contrarian interpreters suggest Orpheus looked back deliberately, unable to bear the uncertainty, choosing definitive loss over the torture of never knowing. Ancient Greek pottery depicts this scene repeatedly, Orpheus turning, Eurydice fading, the moment of loss crystallized in red and black figures. It was clearly a story that resonated deeply, perhaps because it validates universal fears that we'll fail at the crucial moment, that our love won't be strong enough, that the universe designs tests specifically calibrated to our weaknesses. Orpheus remains outside the cave for days, unable to move, unable to function, unable to do anything but replay the moment in his mind with obsessive detail. What if he'd waited just 3 more seconds? What if he'd closed his eyes entirely to resist the temptation of looking? What if he'd asked Eurydice to sing or speak, to provide audible confirmation of her presence? The what-ifs multiply like rabbits, each one a fresh wound, each one proving that there's no torture quite like the torture of self-inflicted loss. Eventually, hunger and thirst force him to move. He drinks from a stream without tasting the water, eats berries without noticing what they are, and begins to wander aimlessly through the Thracian wilderness. He's become a ghost himself in all but technicality, haunting the landscape rather than truly inhabiting it, his mind trapped in the moment of looking back, unable to move forward into any kind of future. His music changes. Before, it was beautiful, technically perfect, emotionally resonant, capable of charming nature itself. Now it's something else, something raw and broken and almost painful to hear. He plays his grief in minor keys that make stones weep, melodies that cause flowers to wilt in sympathy, harmonies that convince birds to stop singing because what's the point of beauty in a world that allows such loss? People try to approach him, offering comfort or companionship or just basic human connection. He refuses them all. Women are particularly drawn to this tragic figure. There's something compelling about grief that profound, something that makes others want to fix or soothe or absorb some of the pain. But Orpheus wants none of it. He's sworn off love entirely, convinced that caring for anything only opens you to devastation. Better to be alone, to feel nothing, to exist in numb isolation than risk experiencing that moment of loss again. This rejection doesn't go unnoticed. The women of Thrace, particularly the Maenads, those wild female followers of Dionysus who worship through ecstatic frenzy, grow increasingly offended by Orpheus's refusal of their advances. Some scholars suggest they represent primal feminine energy rejected by civilization's patriarchal structures. Others interpret them more literally as actual cult members who engaged in ritual activities that seemed threatening to mainstream Greek society. Either way, they're not the type of women you want to offend. The Maenads try multiple times to seduce or at least engage Orpheus. They dance around him while he plays, their movements sensual and inviting, offering themselves with increasingly obvious gestures. They bring him wine, Dionysian sacred drink meant to lower inhibitions and open hearts. They speak to him of pleasure, of forgetting, of moving forward into new experiences rather than remaining trapped in the past. He refuses everything with a coldness that's insulting, treating them like they're invisible or irrelevant. You can feel the tension building, the way ignored desire curdles into anger, the way rejected connection transforms into rage. The Maenads' behaviour becomes more aggressive. their invitations shading into demands, their dancing becoming more frenzied. Dionysus himself, god of wine, madness, and breaking boundaries, has blessed them with his divine frenzy, and when that frenzy turns violent, it's unstoppable as an avalanche. The attack comes during one of Orpheus's solitary concerts, when he sits on a hillside playing for no audience except the indifferent landscape. The Maenads approach in a group, their movements synchronized in that eerie way crowds sometimes move when possessed by collective purpose. They're carrying theosoi, those pine-cone-tipped staffs wrapped in ivy that serve as both ritual objects and weapons, and their faces are flushed with wine and fury and something more primal than either. "Play for us, Orpheus," they call out, their voices blending into a single demand. "Play songs of love, of Dionysus, of joy. Stop this endless mourning that insults the god of life and pleasure." Orpheus doesn't even look up. His fingers continue their melancholy melody. His voice joins in singing of loss and longing, and his complete dismissal of their presence is the final insult they'll tolerate. The Maenads' faces twist with rage, and they begin to scream. Not words, just sound, raw fury given voice. They throw stones at him, branches, anything within reach, trying to interrupt his music and force acknowledgement. Here's where the story takes on an almost mythical quality, which is funny to say about a myth, but this part feels especially symbolic, especially distant from reality. Orpheus's music is so beautiful, so powerful, that the stones and branches refuse to strike him. They fall short or veer aside. Charmed by the melodies into betraying their thrower's intent, the trees themselves seem to lean toward Orpheus protectively, their branches creating a canopy of defence. It's nature itself choosing sides, preferring beauty over violence. But the Maenads are blessed by Dionysus, and when divine frenzy meets divine music, something has to give. They increase their screaming, their shrieks growing louder and wilder until they drown out Orpheus's lyre entirely. Without the music's protection, the stones find their target. The first one strikes Orpheus in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The second catches his temple, drawing blood that runs down into his beard. The third shatters his lyre, snapping strings and splintering wood, silencing the instrument that once charmed death itself. Without his music, Orpheus is just a man, a grief-hollowed, weakened man who hasn't eaten properly in months, who barely sleeps, who's been courting death without quite having the courage to embrace it directly. The Maenads fall upon him like wolves on a wounded deer, their theosoi rising and falling, their hands tearing, their teeth, yes, their teeth, biting into flesh. It's savage and horrible and disturbingly intimate. This murder by a crowd of women he rejected. This death at the hands of frustrated desire turned inside out. They dismember him in their frenzy. It's the specific punishment for those who refuse Dionysus. To be torn apart, sparagmos the Greeks called it. A ritual destruction that featured in the god's most extreme worship practices. Archaeological evidence and ancient texts confirm that real Dionysian cults did perform symbolic or perhaps actual dismemberment rituals, though historians still argue whether these involved human victims or were purely animal sacrifices interpreted through sensational mythology. Either way, the imagery is unmistakable. Orpheus is literally torn to pieces by the forces he rejected. His head, separated from his body, rolls down the hillside into the river, specifically the Hebrus River in Thrace, which still flows today through what's now Bulgaria and Turkey. And here the myth gets even stranger. The head continues to sing, even severed, even dying. Orpheus's head floats down the river while his lips form his beloved's name. Eurydice, Eurydice, over and over like a prayer or curse or final testimony of devotion. His lyre floats beside the head, still miraculously intact despite being shattered moments before, because myths bend reality when symbolism demands it. The lyre plays itself. ghostly music accompanying the singing head as they drift downstream together, past villages where people stop their work to stare, past fishing boats whose occupants cross themselves or make warding gestures, past reeds that bow as they pass as if paying respects to genius destroyed. The head and lyre eventually wash ashore on Lesbos, that island famous for its poets and musicians, and the locals bury the head with great ceremony. They build a shrine there, and people claim that for years afterward, the head continues to prophesy from beneath the earth, offering oracular wisdom like a decapitated prophet. Some versions say Apollo himself intervenes, jealous that a mortal's oracle might rival his own at Delphi, and silences the head permanently. Other versions suggest the head eventually falls silent on its own, having finally said everything it needed to say. Orpheus's lyre is placed among the stars by Zeus, becoming the constellation Lyra that still hangs in the northern sky. On clear nights you can see it, a parallelogram of bright stars with a smaller triangle attached, looking somewhat like a simplified harp. It's a memorial to music so powerful it challenged death, and a reminder that even the gods recognize true artistry when they encounter it. Ancient Greek astronomers could identify Lyra by early summer evenings, and they tell the story of Orpheus to explain why that particular pattern of stars represented a musical instrument. As for Orpheus's shade, it descends to the underworld one final time, permanently now. No conditions, no possible returns, and there, waiting for him in the grey fields of Asphodel, is Eurydice. She's been there since he looked back, existing in that diminished way the dead exist, but when Orpheus's shade appears, some spark of recognition and joy illuminates her insubstantial features. They reunite in death, these doomed lovers, finally together without conditions or tests or fears of separation. Now they can look at each other as much as they want, can walk side by side through eternity, can love without the complications that destroyed them in life. It's not the happy ending anyone wanted. Both are dead. Both are reduced to shadows of their living selves, but it's the ending myth provides. Some comfort exists in knowing that even death couldn't ultimately keep them apart, that their reunion was delayed but not prevented. That love persists even when stripped of flesh and blood and breath. Scholars debate what the Orpheus myth ultimately means. Is it about the impossibility of escaping death? Proof that even the greatest art and deepest love cannot overturn fundamental cosmic laws? Is it about faith and doubt? Showing how lack of trust at the crucial moment destroys everything? Is it about the dangers of obsessive love, suggesting that healthier grief would have let Eurydice rest and allowed Orpheus to eventually heal? Or is it simply about tragedy's inexorable nature? How some stories are doomed from the start and unfolding them only reveals patterns already written. The myth influenced countless later works, Virgil's telling in the Georgics, Ovid's version in the Metamorphoses, Monteverdi's opera, Gluck's opera, dozens of paintings and sculptures and poems across centuries. Something about the image of Orpheus turning, Eurydice fading, love failing at the final test. It resonates across cultures and eras, perhaps because it validates our deepest fear, that we're not strong enough to save what we love, that our human weakness will betray our most profound commitments. But let's shift our attention now to a different flavour of cursed love. One where the curse isn't imposed by circumstance or tests, but by beauty itself. Beauty so intense it attracts divine attention, which is always dangerous for mortals. You find yourself in Cyprus, that island sacred to Aphrodite where she first emerged from sea foam, where her temples dominate the landscape and her worship pervades every aspect of life. The air smells of myrtle and roses, flowers sacred to the goddess, and the Mediterranean sun beats down with the kind of warmth that makes you understand why ancient people worshipped it. This is a place where beauty is currency, where physical perfection opens doors and attracts divine favour. A young man walks through the forest, and you immediately understand why this story will end badly. Adonis, his name possibly derived from the Semitic Adon meaning lord, suggesting the myth has roots in Near Eastern religious traditions, is beautiful in a way that seems almost weaponized. His features are perfectly symmetrical. His body moves with unconscious grace. His skin glows with youth and health. And there's something in his eyes that suggests he has no idea how devastating his appearance is to those who behold it. He's hunting, a bow slung across his shoulder, tracking deer through the underbrush with focused intensity. Historians still argue whether Adonis was originally a Greek figure or imported from Phoenician or Cypriot traditions, possibly related to the dying and rising god Tammuz worshipped across the ancient Near East. Archaeological evidence shows Adonis cults existed throughout the Mediterranean, with particular concentration in Cyprus and the Levant. The rituals associated with him, planting gardens of Adonis that sprouted quickly and died young, seem to preserve very ancient agricultural magic related to seasonal death and rebirth. Adonis was born from tragedy, his very existence the result of a curse so convoluted it requires its own explanation. His mother, Mira, was cursed to fall in love with her own father, tricked him into incest, and was transformed into a myrrh tree when the truth emerged. Adonis literally split forth from the tree's bark, a child born from wood and shame and divine punishment. The nymphs raised him, and he grew into this impossibly beautiful young man, carrying trauma in his origins, but displaying none of it in his features. Aphrodite first sees Adonis while flying over Cyprus, and even from that altitude, his beauty catches her divine eye. She descends for a closer look, disguising herself as a mortal woman to avoid overwhelming him with her full glory. Up close, he's even more striking. His face has the kind of beauty that makes you forget to breathe, that makes your chest tight with something between desire and grief. He looks up at her approach, smiles with friendly curiosity, and Aphrodite feels something she hasn't experienced in eons. Genuine surprise at her own reaction. This is the goddess of love falling in love, which should be redundant but isn't. Aphrodite controls love, manipulates it, distributes it like a resource, but she rarely experiences it herself with this intensity. Usually her affairs are casual, motivated by whim or boredom or political manoeuvring among the gods. But looking at Adonis, she feels something urgent and consuming. Desire mixed with possessiveness, mixed with a strange vulnerability she deeply resents. She begins to appear regularly on his hunts, no longer bothering with full disguise. She reveals her divine nature gradually, lets him see the supernatural radiance that mortals usually find overwhelming. Adonis, for his part, is flattered and confused in equal measure. Having a goddess pursue you is both the highest compliment imaginable and deeply unsettling, like being courted by a force of nature that could destroy you with casual indifference. They become lovers in that clearing you're standing in now, surrounded by olive trees and wild roses. And for a while it's genuinely happy. Aphrodite is gentler with Adonis than she's been with most of her conquests, treating him with a care that suggests she's aware of his mortality, his fragility compared to her eternal nature. She teaches him about love's varieties, not just physical passion but tenderness, companionship, the vulnerability of caring for another being. He listens and learns and responds with the eager devotion of someone experiencing profound emotion for the first time. Aphrodite starts neglecting her other responsibilities, spending so much time with Adonis that prayers go unanswered. Temples receive no visions, and lovers across the world suddenly find their romances stalling without divine assistance. Ares, her on-again off-again divine lover, the god of war who's the opposite of everything Adonis represents, grows jealous watching Aphrodite lavish attention on this mortal boy. Ares is accustomed to sharing Aphrodite with her husband Hephaestus, even with other gods occasionally. But being displaced by a mere human is an insult he takes very personally. Some versions of the story give Ares an active role in what happens next, suggesting he engineers the tragedy out of jealous spite. Other versions ignore Ares entirely, making the catastrophe simple bad luck rather than divine malice. Either way, the seeds of destruction are being planted while Adonis and Aphrodite walk hand in hand through meadows, picking flowers and imagining a future they'll never share. Aphrodite warns Adonis about the dangers of his favourite activity. "You're so young, so mortal," she tells him, running her fingers through his hair with possessive tenderness. "Promise me you'll be careful when you hunt. Chase deer and rabbits, but avoid the dangerous beasts, boars, bears, lions. They could kill you so easily, and my power doesn't extend to reversing death. Even goddesses have limits." It's rather like telling someone not to think about elephants. The warning itself plants the seed of the forbidden action. Adonis promises to be careful, but you can see the way his eyes linger on boar tracks when they cross paths, the way his grip tightens on his spear when he imagines facing something truly dangerous. He's young and male and mortal, which means he's convinced of his own invincibility, despite all evidence to the contrary. Aphrodite sees this stubborn confidence and feels dread settle in her divine stomach, a premonition she can't quite articulate. One morning, Aphrodite has business on Olympus that she cannot postpone. Even goddesses have obligations, meetings with other deities, cosmic politics that demand attention. She kisses Adonis goodbye, makes him promise one more time to be careful, and reluctantly leaves him alone. The moment she's gone, Adonis feels the absence like a physical cold, and he decides to distract himself with what he knows best: hunting. His dogs pick up a scent almost immediately, something large, something that's been rooting through the underbrush, leaving deep furrows in the earth with its tusks. Boar tracks, unmistakable and fresh, leading deeper into the forest where shadows grow thick and the air smells of damp earth and danger. Adonis should turn back, should remember Aphrodite's warnings, should choose the safer prey. But there's something intoxicating about the forbidden, isn't there? And proving himself capable of facing danger without divine protection suddenly seems vitally important. He follows the tracks, his hunting party spreading out around him, mortal companions who don't question their prince's decisions, even when those decisions smell like trouble. The boar they're tracking isn't ordinary, of course. Nothing in Greek mythology is ever just ordinary. This is a massive creature, potentially the largest boar in Cyprus, perhaps supernaturally enhanced by Ares if you believe the versions where he's actively engineering disaster, or simply a particularly aggressive specimen if you prefer the naturalistic interpretation. The beast emerges from a thicket with terrifying suddenness, and you feel your heart stop at the sight of it. This boar is the size of a small horse, with shoulders that could knock down a man, legs like tree trunks, and tusks curved like crescent moons, yellowed with age and sharp as any blade. Its eyes are small and mean, glinting with animal intelligence and rage at being pursued into its own territory. Foam flecks its snout, and its breathing sounds like bellows working, harsh and aggressive. Adonis raises his spear, his form perfect. He's practiced this throw 1,000 times, can hit a target at this distance without conscious thought. The spear flies true, striking the boar in the shoulder, sinking deep into muscle and hide. It's a good hit, the kind that should slow the beast, weaken it, make the kill easier, but it's not a killing blow, and that makes all the difference between triumph and tragedy. The boar screams, a sound you didn't know boars could make, high-pitched and furious, pain transformed into rage. Instead of fleeing or collapsing, the beast charges directly at Adonis with the kind of speed that seems impossible for something so large. The ground shakes beneath its hooves. Small trees snap as it bulls through them. and suddenly there's no time to ready another spear. No time to do anything except realise this moment is going catastrophically wrong. Adonis tries to dodge, his body moving with athletic grace, but the boar anticipates the movement, or perhaps luck simply abandons him at the crucial instant. The boar's tusk catches him in the groin, that vulnerable place where the femoral artery runs close to the surface, and rips upward with the force of the charge behind it. The tusk penetrates deep, tearing through flesh and finding that major blood vessel, and suddenly Adonis is fountaining blood in arterial spurts that paint the forest floor crimson. He falls, the impact driving breath from his lungs, and his hands instinctively move to the wound, trying to stanch flow that cannot be stanched. The boar wheels for another charge, but Adonis's hunting party drives it off with spears and shouts, more concerned now with protecting their fallen leader than completing the hunt. They crowd around Adonis, their faces showing the progression from concern to horror to helpless despair as they realise how bad the injury is. Medical knowledge in ancient Greece was surprisingly sophisticated in some areas. They understood that cutting the femoral artery meant almost certain death. That blood loss this rapid couldn't be stopped with battlefield medicine available at the time. Some scholars suggest the specific nature of Adonis's wound, groin injury from a boar's tusk, carries symbolic weight related to fertility, sexuality, the vulnerability of male genitalia. Others simply note that boar hunting was genuinely dangerous, and injuries like this did happen to real hunters with tragic regularity. Adonis lies in spreading blood, his beautiful face going pale as shock sets in, and he whispers Aphrodite's name. It's not quite a prayer and not quite a goodbye, just acknowledgement that he wishes she were here, that he's broken his promise, that he's sorry. His hunting companions try to comfort him, but what comfort exists when you're watching someone bleed to death in front of you, when every heartbeat pumps more life out onto uncaring ground? Aphrodite, up on Olympus, suddenly feels wrongness crash through her like a physical blow. The sensation is hard to describe. Imagine your heart dropping into your stomach while simultaneously your head fills with static and your vision narrows to a tunnel. She knows, the way lovers sometimes know, that something terrible is happening. She abandons whatever divine business occupied her, spreads her wings, and dives from Olympus towards Cyprus at speeds that blur the landscape below into meaningless streaks of colour. She follows the psychic connection between them, that invisible thread that links all lovers, and it draws her directly to the clearing where Adonis lies dying. She sees the blood first, so much blood, impossibly much, soaking into earth that will remember this moment and mark it with flowers. She sees his pale face, his dim-in eyes, his chest moving with increasingly shallow breaths. She drops beside him, her divine robes trailing in his blood, gathering him into her arms with desperate tenderness. "No, no, no," she says, the words running together into a single keening sound. "I warned you. I told you. Why didn't you listen?" But she knows why. He was young and mortal and male, a combination that makes caution nearly impossible, that makes the forbidden irresistible. She presses her hands over his wound, trying to use divine power to heal, but death has its hooks in him already, and even goddesses cannot always undo what fate has set in motion. Adonis looks up at her, manages a weak smile that breaks your heart. "I'm sorry," he whispers, each word costing him effort he doesn't have to spare. "You were right. You're always..." But he doesn't finish the sentence because his eyes roll back and his breathing stops, and just like that he's gone, transformed from person to corpse in the space between heartbeats. Aphrodite screams, and the sound carries across Cyprus, causing flowers to wilt and lovers to suddenly weep without knowing why. She holds Adonis's body, rocking back and forth, her divine beauty marred by very mortal grief, tears streaming down her face and mixing with his blood. This is what mortals feel. She realizes this crushing weight of permanent loss, this knowledge that someone you love will never smile again, never speak again, never exist as anything but memory and absence. But Aphrodite is not merely a grieving lover, she's a goddess. And goddesses have options mortals lack. She cannot bring Adonis back to life. That's beyond even her considerable power. But she can ensure he's remembered, that his blood doesn't simply sink into earth and disappear. She takes the red-stained soil in her hands and whispers words of transformation, spending divine energy like currency, reshaping reality in small but permanent ways. From the blood-soaked earth, flowers begin to grow, pushing up through soil still warm with mortality, unfurling petals the precise shade of arterial blood, delicate and temporary and heartbreakingly beautiful. Anemones. They'll be called from the Greek word for wind, because like Adonis's life they're fragile and brief, blown away by the slightest breeze. They bloom fast and die young, a perfect metaphor for the boy whose death created them. And they'll return every spring as a reminder that beauty and tragedy are often inseparable. The anemone has remarkable properties that seem almost designed to symbolize this story. The flowers bloom early in spring, often among the first to appear, as if eager to greet the world. But they're ephemeral, lasting only days before their petals scatter in the wind, leaving behind the bare stems like tiny monuments to transience. Ancient Greeks saw these flowers and thought of Adonis, making the connection between brief beauty and doomed youth automatic and inevitable. Some botanical scholars suggest the flower referenced might actually be the crown anemone, which blooms blood red across the Mediterranean, or possibly the poppy, which also features prominently in mourning symbolism. But Aphrodite isn't finished with her transformations. She looks at Adonis's body, now as pale as marble, and she cannot bear the thought of it rotting in the earth, decomposing into nothing, forgotten beneath the soil. She performs another act of divine manipulation, reaching down into the underworld itself, negotiating with Persephone, who rules there alongside Hades. And here the story takes an interesting turn, because Persephone sees Adonis's shade arrive in her realm, and she's struck by the same quality that captivated Aphrodite. This young man is beautiful even in death, his shade retaining the echoes of the perfection his living form possessed. Persephone, who spends half her time in the underworld's grey monotony, who rarely encounters anything truly lovely in the realm of the dead, finds herself wanting to keep Adonis close. She's lonely down there, despite Hades' companionship, and Adonis represents something spring-like and vital, even in shade form. When Aphrodite arrives to claim Adonis' spirit, Persephone refuses. "He's mine now," the Queen of the Dead says, her voice carrying surprising steel. "He came to my realm, he's under my authority, and I've no intention of releasing him." It's a rare moment of defiance from Persephone, who usually defers to more powerful goddesses. But apparently Adonis is worth fighting for. Aphrodite's response is immediate rage. "You dare keep from me the one mortal I've truly loved? Release him immediately, or I'll tear this realm apart stone by stone." It's not an idle threat. Aphrodite has considerable power, and her fury when thwarted is legendary. The two goddesses face each other across the throne room of the dead, both utterly unwilling to compromise, both convinced of their rightful claim. The confrontation escalates quickly, divine energies crackling in the air, and it becomes clear that if someone doesn't intervene, the underworld might become a battlefield between two of Olympus's most formidable goddesses. Hades, probably exhausted by the drama invading his usually orderly realm, appeals to Zeus to settle the dispute before it gets even more destructive. Zeus listens to both sides, and you can see the calculation in his eyes. He's deciding which goddess to offend less, which compromise will minimize the political fallout. He's dealt with similar disputes before. His own intervention in Persephone's situation with Demeter established precedent for split custody arrangements. Some scholars suggest these division of time myths reflect actual religious practice, where deities were thought to be accessible during certain seasons but absent during others, explaining why prayers went unanswered at particular times of year. Zeus makes his ruling with the authority of the king of gods, knowing both parties will hate it but unable to find a better solution. Adonis will be divided, he declares, and that word divided makes both goddesses flinch. 4 months he will spend with Aphrodite in the world above, 4 months he will remain with Persephone in the underworld, and 4 months he will be his own, free to choose where he wishes to be. It's meant to be fair, but fairness often satisfies no one. Aphrodite gets her lover back for a part of the year, but loses him for another part, and the 4 free months, well, Adonis chooses to spend those with Aphrodite too, because apparently even in death he prefers life and love to the grey monotony of the underworld. Persephone is left with only 4 months annually, but at least it's something, a guaranteed time when beauty visits her dark realm and makes eternity slightly more bearable. The cycle repeats eternally. Adonis rises from the underworld each spring, returning to life in a sense, and the anemones bloom to mark his resurrection. He spends the warm months with Aphrodite, walking the earth in whatever form shades can take when temporarily released from death, and the world responds to his presence with fertility and growth. Then, as summer fades into autumn, he must descend again, returning to Persephone's realm, and the anemones wither and die. The earth grows cold, mourning his departure. This dying and rising pattern connects Adonis to other Near Eastern deities, Tammuz in Mesopotamia, Baal in Canaan, Osiris in Egypt, all gods associated with vegetation, fertility, seasonal death and rebirth. Mystery cults formed around Adonis, particularly strong among women, who performed annual lamentation rituals marking his death and celebrated his return. These Adonia festivals featured women creating small gardens in pots, quick-growing seeds that sprouted fast and died young, mirroring Adonis's brief life, and then ritually mourning over them and throwing them into the sea. Archaeological evidence from across the Mediterranean confirms these festivals were widespread and deeply meaningful. Terracotta pots specifically designed for Adonis gardens have been found in Cyprus, Greece, and Alexandria. Ancient writers describe women gathering on rooftops, planting their gardens, keeping them just 8 days, the same number of days Adonis lived after meeting Aphrodite in some versions, and then ceremonially discarding them while singing dirges. It was public grief performed annually, a way of acknowledging that beauty dies, that what we love doesn't last, that life itself is as temporary as flowers blooming in shallow soil. Aphrodite's love for Adonis changes her in ways the other myths don't quite manage. She becomes associated with mourning as well as passion, with loss as well as desire. Temples to Aphrodite sometimes doubled as places of lamentation, where people came not to ask for love but to grieve its loss, to mourn relationships that ended, to acknowledge that the goddess who brings love also takes it away. It's a more complete understanding of love than the purely joyful version allows, recognizing that deep affection makes us vulnerable to profound suffering. Do you remember how this section began, with Adonis hunting in the forest, beautiful and doomed? The curse of his love wasn't imposed from outside, it was intrinsic to the situation. When gods love mortals, mortality wins eventually. It always does. The gods can delay, can create cyclical resurrections, can transform blood into flowers, but they cannot fundamentally change the fact that mortal things end. Adonis's beauty was his curse because it attracted divine attention, and divine attention is dangerous when the divine being can't protect you from your own nature. Some feminist readings of the Adonis myth note that he's essentially objectified by both goddesses, treated as a beautiful possession to be claimed and divided, rather than as a person with agency. He doesn't get to choose whether he wants to be with Aphrodite or Persephone. Zeus decides for him, and even his free months are constrained by divine expectations. His beauty makes him a prize to be won, and his desires, if he is any beyond what the goddesses project onto him, remain unexplored in the traditional versions of the story. The flowers that bloom from Adonis's blood aren't just botanical curiosities, they become symbols woven into the fabric of ancient Mediterranean culture in ways that ripple forward through centuries. You see them painted on pottery, carved into temple friezes, mentioned in poetry from Sappho to Ovid. The anemone becomes shorthand for beautiful fragility, for youth cut short, for love that cannot survive contact with mortality's sharp edges. When ancient Greeks wanted to express the idea that something lovely wouldn't last, they compared it to anemones, knowing everyone would understand the reference immediately. The ritual gardens deserve more attention than they usually receive, because they're actually quite clever as symbolic technology. Imagine you're an ancient Greek woman, living in a world where you have limited control over most aspects of your life, where men make the big decisions, where your primary value is often tied to your reproductive capacity. The Adonia festivals give you space to publicly grieve, to acknowledge loss, to participate in a story about divine love that ends badly. You plant your little garden in a broken pot or shallow basket. You water it obsessively for 8 days, watching the seeds sprout with unnatural speed in the Mediterranean heat. The shoots grow leggy and weak, never developing proper roots, and then they wither. You knew they would wither, that's the entire point. But you still feel the small grief of watching something die that you tended. Then you gather with other women, and together you carry your dead gardens through the streets, singing mourning songs, wailing in ritualized grief that's both performance and genuine emotion. Some versions of the festival include throwing the gardens into the sea or into springs, returning them to water, perhaps symbolizing return to the womb, to pre-birth, to the source. It's cathartic in ways that regular life didn't permit. Public expression of sorrow, communal acknowledgement that beautiful things die, shared experience of loss that creates bonds between participants. Historians still debate whether these festivals represented genuine religious sentiment or were more social occasions with religious veneer, or whether that distinction even makes sense in ancient contexts where religion and daily life were thoroughly intertwined. Some scholars suggest the Adonia were particularly popular with courtesans and unmarried women, those whose relationships existed outside traditional marriage structures, giving them a deity and festivals that acknowledged their particular experiences of love and loss. Others note that plenty of respectable married women participated enthusiastically, suggesting the appeal cut across social boundaries. The transformation of Adonis's blood into flowers carries another layer of meaning when you consider ancient Greek theories about blood and fertility. Blood was understood as essential life force, particularly menstrual blood and the blood of childbirth, both associated with female reproductive power. By having Adonis's blood specifically become flowers, not just any plants, but blooming reproductive structures of plants, the myth connects male death to female fertility in complex ways. The blood that flowed from his groin wound, from that site of masculine sexual power, transforms into flowers that bloom and seed and propagate, taking on qualities coded as feminine in ancient thought. This might be why so many women connected deeply with Adonis's story. His suffering and death weren't heroic in the traditional martial sense. He didn't fall gloriously in battle against worthy opponents. He died from a hunting accident, from overconfidence and bad luck and a moment's miscalculation, bleeding out on the ground while calling for his lover. It's an unheroic death, vulnerable and somewhat embarrassing, and perhaps that made it more relatable than the grand deaths of warriors celebrated elsewhere in Greek myth. Aphrodite's transformation through loving Adonis also deserves attention. Before him, she's largely invulnerable, playing with others' emotions, causing love and chaos with equal indifference. never really feeling the consequences of her manipulations, but loving Adonis mortal style, experiencing the grief of losing him permanently even if he gets partial resurrection, changes her into something more complex. She gains dimension, becomes less purely frivolous, understands why mortals pray to her so desperately. Some ancient writers suggest that after Adonis, Aphrodite becomes more sympathetic to human lovers' pleas, more willing to help because she's experienced similar pain herself. The cult sites where Adonis was worshipped often featured springs or water sources, places where boundaries between realms seemed permeable, underground water rising to the surface, connecting the underworld to the world above. The most famous was at Aphaca in Lebanon, where a temple to Aphrodite stood beside a spectacular waterfall. Ancient sources claim that each year, a mysterious red colour would appear in the water, interpreted as Adonis's blood flowing up from the underworld, and believers would gather to perform mourning rituals. Modern scientists suggest the red coloration came from iron-rich sediment, or possibly red algae blooms, but the ancients saw it as direct evidence that their mythology was literally true, that Adonis's blood actually did flow annually through the earth. Similar phenomena were reported at multiple sites across Cyprus, Lebanon, and Greece. Springs that ran red at certain times, usually late spring or early summer, coinciding with the festivals marking Adonis's return and subsequent death. The correlation between natural events and mythological narratives strengthened belief in the story's reality, creating a feedback loop where myth explained nature and nature confirmed myth. It's a reminder that ancient people weren't simply making up random stories, they were trying to explain observable phenomena through narrative frameworks that made sense within their worldview. The split custody arrangement between Aphrodite and Persephone creates an interesting dynamic that some modern readers interpret through the lens of polyamory or unconventional relationship structures. Adonis effectively has two divine girlfriends who have reached an uneasy truce about sharing him. Mediated by Zeus's patriarchal authority, neither goddess is entirely happy with the arrangement, but both prefer partial access to no access at all. It's a pragmatic solution to conflicting desires, enforced by power dynamics rather than genuine mutual agreement. Persephone's attraction to Adonis is sometimes under-examined in favour of focusing on Aphrodite's grief. But it's actually quite interesting when you think about it. Persephone spends half her time as queen of the underworld, surrounded by death and grey monotony, married to Hades who, while not cruel, is fundamentally serious and gloomy. Reflecting his realm, Adonis represents something entirely different. Youth, beauty, vitality, spring, everything the underworld lacks. Her desire to keep him might be about more than just finding him attractive. It might be about wanting something alive and lovely in her death realm, a reminder of what she leaves behind when she descends each autumn. Some versions suggest Persephone and Adonis develop genuine affection during his 4-month annual stays in the underworld, that it's not simply about possession but about actual connection. They're both caught between realms in different ways. She's trapped by pomegranate seeds and divine politics. He's trapped by death and goddesses' conflicting claims. They might understand each other in ways Aphrodite, always fully divine and never truly constrained, cannot comprehend. It's the kind of nuance that oral storytelling traditions might have explored, but written versions simplified for brevity. The myth's ending, with its eternal cycle of death and resurrection, offers a different kind of closure than the happy ever after of Eros and Psyche or the permanent tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice. Adonis exists in perpetual return, never fully alive but never completely dead either. Cycling through the seasons like the agricultural year itself cycles through planting, growth, harvest, and fallow. There's something both hopeful and melancholy about it. Yes, he returns, but he always leaves again. Yes, the flowers bloom, but they always wither. It's a mythology of acceptance rather than resolution. acknowledging that some patterns repeat eternally without ever reaching conclusion. As you stand now among these stories of cursed love, patterns begin to emerge like constellations, becoming visible as your eyes adjust darkness. Each tale we've traced tonight follows different paths to heartbreak, but they share common threads woven through their centres: divine interference, impossible conditions, the fundamental tension between what mortals desire and what the cosmos permits. Love in these stories isn't the neat, redemptive force that modern narratives often promise. It's complicated, dangerous, transformative in ways that don't always lead anywhere you'd want to go. Psyche and Eros teach you that love requires both trust and courage, that curiosity can destroy paradise, but persistence might rebuild it. Their story is the gentlest of tonight's quartet, the one that edges closest to hope, suggesting that if both parties fight hard enough and survive sufficient trials, divine obstacles can be overcome. But even their happy ending required Psyche to die to her mortal nature, to become something other than human, to transform so completely that she could meet Eros as an equal. The price of loving a god, it seems, is ceasing to be fully yourself, a cost that sounds romantic until you examine it closely and realize how much gets sacrificed in that transaction. Apollo and Daphne show love twisted by entitlement and rejection, where pursuit becomes predation and escape requires self-destruction. Daphne's transformation into Laurel is celebrated as eternal connection in Apollo's narrative, but from her perspective it's permanent imprisonment in a form that cannot flee, cannot speak, cannot refuse. She said no with her body, no with her words, no with every fibre of her being, and still she ends up claimed, her very bark carved with dedications to the god she rejected. The laurel crown that marks achievement across millennia is also a monument to ignored consent, beauty carved from trauma, victory built on someone else's defeat. It's the darkest of our tales tonight because it never acknowledges its own darkness, never questions whether Apollo's eternal devotion to a tree that was once a terrified woman might be obsession rather than love. Orpheus and Eurydice demonstrate love's vulnerability to doubt, how even the most profound connection can shatter against the simple human inability to trust without verification. Their tragedy is so intimate, so relatable. You can imagine yourself in Orpheus's position, walking through darkness, straining to hear footsteps that might or might not exist, feeling certainty erode with every step. The looking back moment haunts because it feels simultaneously inevitable and preventable. A failure that's both completely understandable and absolutely unforgivable, and yet they reunite eventually in death, finding together what life denied them, proving that some bonds survive even catastrophic mistakes if you're willing to wait an entire lifetime, or death time, for reunion. It's a strange comfort, acknowledging that love continues even when stripped of everything that makes living worthwhile. Adonis and Aphrodite reveal that beauty itself can be a curse when it attracts divine attention, that being desired by the powerful is often more dangerous than being ignored. Adonis dies pursuing exactly the kind of glory that mortal men were supposed to pursue, facing dangerous beasts, proving courage, earning the right to be called heroic. But his death transforms from tragedy into something else through ritual, through the flowers that bloom annually, through the festivals where women gathered to mourn collectively. His story becomes communal property, a framework for processing loss that extends far beyond the specific individuals involved. The goddess learns grief, the mortal becomes a seasonal deity, and the blood-soaked earth remembers by blooming red each spring, marking time with petals that fall like tears. Do you remember at the beginning, when you first stepped into these tales, how love seemed like it might be simpler than it is? These myths preserve ancient wisdom about desire's complicated nature, how it ennobles and destroys, how it can drive you to attempt the impossible and break you when you fail, how loving something deeply makes you vulnerable in ways that nothing else can match. The Greeks understood that passion and suffering were closely related, that the same heart capable of profound joy was equally capable of crushing grief. They didn't separate love from its consequences the way modern romance sometimes tries to, pretending that genuine affection somehow protects against loss or guarantees happy endings. These stories survived millennia because they address something fundamental about human experience. We love what we cannot keep. We desire what destroys us. We trust when we shouldn't and doubt when we should trust. And somehow we continue loving anyway, despite knowing how badly it can end. The gods in these tales aren't role models, they're amplified humans. Their flaws magnified to cosmic scale. Their mistakes echoing through eternity. They show us ourselves reflected in divine mirrors, all our weaknesses blown up large enough that we can't ignore or rationalize them away. The transformations matter too, don't they? Psyche grows butterfly wings. Daphne becomes laurel. Orpheus's head continues singing. Adonis returns as flowers, each change marking how love alters the lover, makes them into something they weren't before. Sometimes the transformation elevates, grants immortality or eternal remembrance. Sometimes it imprisons, removes agency, fixes you in a single moment forever. The ancient Greeks understood that intense emotion changes people fundamentally, that you cannot love deeply and remain unchanged, that opening yourself to another being always risks transformation you didn't anticipate and might not survive intact. Modern readers sometimes struggle with these myths because they don't offer clear morals or simple lessons. Psyche succeeds through perseverance, but also through receiving help from nature and gods. What exactly should we learn from that? Daphne escapes but loses herself. Is that victory or defeat? Orpheus fails the final test. Is that about human weakness or divine cruelty? Adonis dies despite warnings. Is that tragic fate or natural consequence? The myths resist easy interpretation because life resists easy interpretation. Because love is complicated and outcomes depend on factors beyond individual control. Because sometimes you do everything right and still lose everything. The scholarly debates surrounding these stories reflect their essential ambiguity. Were they religious texts explaining ritual practices, or entertainment that evolved into religious significance? Did people literally believe Daphne became a specific tree? Or was transformation metaphorical from the beginning? How much did the stories change as they passed through different cultures? Greek, Roman, Byzantine, each adding layers of interpretation and emphasis? We'll never fully know the answers because the oral traditions that preceded written versions are lost, leaving only echoes captured in texts written centuries after the myths first formed. What remains undeniable is how these stories shaped Western culture's understanding of love's nature. The tortured romance, the impossible beloved, the love that destroys even as it elevates, the beauty that becomes curse. These patterns repeat through literature, art, music, film, becoming templates we unconsciously apply to our own experiences. When modern lovers talk about soulmates, they're echoing Psyche. When someone describes devastating heartbreak, they're channeling Orpheus. When beauty becomes burden, that's Adonis's legacy. When rejection turns violent, Daphne's shade whispers warnings from her bark. The stories are settling now into quieter spaces, their urgency fading like music heard from increasing distance. You've walked through cursed love's territory tonight, witnessed passion transform into tragedy and tragedy transform into something else. Mythology, ritual, flowers blooming in perpetual memorial. These tales ask much of you and answer little, leaving you with questions that don't resolve neatly, with feelings that resist simple categorization. But perhaps that's appropriate for stories about love, which rarely makes sense when you're experiencing it, which operates according to logic that seems clear in the moment but baffling in retrospect. The Greeks knew this, built their myths to accommodate complexity rather than eliminate it, understood that the most profound human experiences resist reduction to simple truths. Love elevates and destroys, often simultaneously. Beauty attracts danger. Trust requires vulnerability that sometimes gets exploited. Death wins eventually, though love finds ways to persist even in shadow form. Even as flowers that bloom and fade, even as stories told across centuries to listeners settling into sleep. Let these myths rest now, in the part of your mind where dreams form, where narrative and emotion blend together without requiring conscious analysis. The cursed lovers have told their tales. The flowers have bloomed from blood-soaked earth. The lyre hangs among the stars. The laurel rustles with secrets it cannot speak. Tomorrow they'll still be there, these ancient stories, waiting patient as stone for the next person who needs to hear about love that defies death, love that transforms, love that destroys and creates with equal passion. Your breathing has grown slower, deeper, matching the rhythm of stories told across millennia, across countless retellings, across the boundary between waking and dreaming. Let the gods and mortals fade now into gentle darkness, their passions banked like fires at night's end, their grief softened by distance and time. Sleep comes for everyone eventually, even tragic lovers, even those who fought death itself. Rest now, knowing that love, complicated, dangerous, transformative love, has always been worth the stories we tell about it, worth the risks we take, worth remembering even when the endings break our hearts.